Primetime Live will not be seen this week, so that we may bring you a special edition of Nightline. Primetime will return next week at its regularly scheduled time.
This is an ABC News Nightline special investigation.
Get out of here, code 3. Get out of here, code 3. I want you guys out of here. Let's go.
All of us have a responsibility. I don't think anybody ought to think that they're free of any kind of blame.
I don't know who was running the show. And I don't think anyone can tell you who was running the show. The show was kind of just running itself.
And I'm a taxpayer of the city of Los Angeles as well as an employee. I have been shortchanged by the political leadership of this city.
You don't fight it by going out doing these. You're not hurting anybody. What are we teaching our kids?
Moment of crisis. Anatomy of a riot. Now reporting from Los Angeles, Ted Koppel.
It's always the same in the wake of a disaster. People start looking around for someone to blame. In the case of what happened here in South Central Los Angeles, there are plenty of candidates. Obviously, you blame the arsonists who burned down these stores, the people who drag motorists from their cars and trucks. You can blame the gap between the public's perception of what happened in the arrest and beating of Rodney King and the perception of the jury. The social and economic conditions also contribute toward producing the sort of rage that erupted here a month ago. But this is not a program about the underlying causes of the unrest. The roots are too deep. This report has another focus. Only this week, members of a new commission headed by former FBI Director William Webster arrived here in Los Angeles to begin their investigation of how things got out of control so quickly and so completely. That has been the object of our investigation over the past month. More than 60 interviews have underscored for us what Angelenos have known for a long time. Many of the people who run their government agencies, especially those at the very top, can't stand each other. In some instances, won't even talk to one another. Understand that, and you'll know how things got so terribly out of control on the day the verdicts came down.
Wednesday, April 29th. Good afternoon. You're tuned to KNX 1070 News Radio.
When I came to work that day at approximately 2 in the afternoon,
76 degrees in Hollywood right now. It's going down to 63 at the LA Civic Center. 60.
I found a sergeant in charge, and I spoke with him and find out whether or not he was going to hold day watch over.
On the 57 southbound, there at Chapman, a minor injury crash. They're working on the
whether or not he made any provisions to obtain additional radios or vehicles or any such things for the events that could potentially unfold during the evening. There were none.
There was definitely a plan in the Los Angeles Police Department as far as dealing with this type of eventuality.
Stock market is up 23 points to 33.30.
We had some roll call trainings and some trainings in some tactical situations regarding riots, but according to our brass, they didn't expect anything to happen, anything like what happened.
KFWB News Time, 2:43.
The jury deliberating the King beating case says it has now reached verdicts on all but one count.
Just before they read the verdict, I had butterflies in my stomach, just wondering what it was going to be.
We were walking our footbeat, Dan and I, and Jesse is one of the shop owners there, and we stopped in there because we knew we could watch the verdict as it came down.
Judge Weisberg had given Los Angeles authorities 2 hours' notice before the verdicts were announced.
At the courthouse in the Simi Valley, John has been covering the trial from the outset.
I see Judge Stanley Weisberg on the bench. Let's cut to the courtroom right now.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Lawrence M. Powell, not guilty of the crime of assault by Timothy E. Wynn, not guilty of the crime.
This was white America on trial. This was a modern-day lynching. How in God's name could a verdict come back? All these verdicts of not guilty?
You're innocent, man! You're innocent! Keep doing your job!
Lieutenant Mike Mula and his officers of the 77th Street Police Station would be on the front line when trouble broke out later at Florence and Normandy Streets.
The number one thing that concerned me during the evening, and I told the roll call, was that there was no plan that I knew of. I had never seen a plan, and that this was one of the very first days in my 20 years of coming to the police department that I was significantly concerned about my safety and the safety of my officers and the policing of the community before I ever came to work.
Now, Eyewitness News at 4.
Good afternoon. A lot of people right now are saying it is a shocking development in the Simi Valley. Not guilty. That's what the Los Angeles police officers accused of Rodney King heard just within the hour.
You're guilty! You're guilty!
An hour after the verdict, one of the defendants, Sergeant Stacy Kuhn, leaves the courtroom. Lawyers had held their clients back, waiting for the crowd outside to disperse.
I was stunned, shocked. I could simply not believe it. And there's no way that that jury can ever convince me of what happened. It didn't make sense. I saw it with my own eyes, and they were telling us with that verdict. We didn't see what we knew we had seen on television.
But in conveying his shared sense of outrage to the community, Mayor Bradley, in the eyes of many police commanders, contributes to the problem.
That in itself inflames the attitudes of the citizens of Los Angeles. That we did not account for. And I guarantee you, from my perspective, that had an impetus into this entire set of circumstances. No question about it.
All these brothers here and everybody in the whole community has experienced and witnessed a total injustice today, and we're not going for it. We're not going for it. We're going to the street.
The Metropolitan Division, the police department's specialists in riot control and civil disorder, had conducted more than 60 hours in extra training preparing for this day. But most officers of the Metro Division weren't scheduled to report until that evening. Someone in command had decided that riots don't begin in daytime. More than $1 million had also been set aside for police overtime. But during the afternoon that the verdicts were announced, only a few officers were kept beyond their regular shift.
After the verdict, hundreds of officers are allowed to go home at the end of their regular shifts, indicating that there's no expectation of widespread trouble.
Next couple of hours saw a real rise in the tensions on the street. We started getting a lot of hard looks, a lot of comments. You could feel it. You really could feel it in the air.
Hey, man, it's up in there. Anything could happen now.
Yeah, get it going! Get it going! Yeah!
The Los Angeles Police chronology places the first indication of trouble at 4:30. A crime call came in from a local liquor store. A gang member's account fits strikingly with the police record and with the recollections of a news photographer.
From my understanding, people went into the store and just decided that they weren't going to pay for what they were getting. They were stopped at the door, and at that point, Mr. Lee's son was hit in the head with a bottle of beer.
Over our radio, we heard a unit put out a help call or an assistance call at Florence and Normandy, and that's when Chris and I first drove through that area.
I guess Mr. Lee, who was sitting behind the counter, pushed his little panic button, or whatever you want to call it, and that brought the police there in a hurry.
4 police cars went by me, 60 miles an hour, code 3, lights and sirens. I said, now this looks a little more serious. I said, I better follow them.
About 4:30, 5 o'clock, we had heard that there was a gang of police out there on the corner. And when we came out from the back, we had saw them chasing one of our little homies.
Photographer Bart Bartholomew was documenting what would later prove to be the genesis of the riots.
I went through the crowd and got to police officers who were effecting an arrest. And the crowd was yelling at the officers and actually tried to wrestle the suspect from the police. If there were 30 officers there, I'll bet there were 150 people there. I tried to maintain a level, a coolness and a control that would at least allow me to keep shooting. I think you'll see in the second picture that his hands finally wound up behind him in handcuffs, and he was completely under arrest. This was a time when he was thrown up against the side of a car. I realized moment by moment that what was building here was going to boil over.
At the time the officers were attempting to maintain some type of a skirmish line, they were being, of course, pelted with rocks and bottles and everything.
As the rage in the crowd grew, the level of tension rose. Someone right behind me, as close as shoulder contact to me, said, "Cop's going to die tonight." And I heard another voice over on this side that said, "It's Uzi time."
I looked at the situation and I made a determination in agreement with the supervisor on scene that it wasn't worth it.
An officer went down the police line. He patted everybody on the back and said, "We're out of here, we're out of here, get ready to move."
The order to clear the area is given at about 5:45.
One officer is already in his car on the driver's side, and a second officer, his partner, is entering the shotgun side of the car. On the right-hand side, we see a female officer running back towards her unit, and it clearly shows the retreat in motion. The crowd was very empowered by this. It was clearly a victory for them.
Even as the situation at Florence and Normandy is about to get totally out of control, we need to step back for a moment to freeze the action. This city, you need to know, resembles nothing quite so much as a dysfunctional family. Over the past 14 months, the LA Police Department has lost 2 of its 3 assistant chiefs. The one who stayed on, technically the second highest ranking officer in the department, is barely on speaking terms with the chief. Chief Gates and Mayor Bradley don't talk at all. Indeed, on that Wednesday afternoon, just as things are about to get out of hand, the chief and the mayor make separate live appearances on television. They have yet to communicate with one another.
They hate each other. Daryl Gates thinks the mayor is sneaky. He has used those terms. Tom Bradley just wants Gates out. He thinks he's a bully. He never wanted him in the first place.
I know that we must express our profound outrage, our anger, but we must do so in ways that bring honor to ourselves and our communities. We must not bury the gains we have made in the rubble created by destructive behavior.
If we have civil disturbances, we are prepared to deal with that. And I'm not going to go into any detail. Our job is to maintain peace and order on the streets.
When I see the mayor of the city of Los Angeles, Tom Bradley, who does not talk to the chief of police for over 12 months, who's running the city?
At 5:45 that Wednesday afternoon, one corner of the city at Florence and Normandy is about to be run by a mob.
When the crowd had seen the police retreat, they had no one upon whom to focus their rage, and it turned to me. Somebody turned to me and said, "Get his film, get his film."
Take his film! Take his film!
Someone in the crowd helped me. He just felt like a middle linebacker on my right flank, and he said, "I've got to get you to your car. Where's your car? You've got to get out of here." Somebody jumped on the hood, started kicking the windshield. Big crack came across the front of the windshield. Then the doors flung open, and my cameras just disappeared. It just looted my car.
Bartholomew is struck in the face by a rock, but still manages to drive off. It's only when he looks into the rearview mirror that he realizes the damage.
It looked like a pineapple on the side of my face. It scared me into a belief that, hey, I might be really injured here. I better get some help.
A few blocks away, Bartholomew is able to catch up with the police, who are regrouping under the command of Lieutenant Moulin.
I could see that the poor man had damn near been beaten unconscious. He had a contusion or something on the side of his face that was as big as a grapefruit.
And Moulin looked at me and said, yes, you do need a doctor. He said, I'm going to get you one, and you sit down right here.
I told him I would not leave the area, that I did not take him in his car with me.
I realized that there was still a roll of film in the car.
And he says, if I go unconscious, I want you to make sure the New York Times gets these. And I said, I will.
I didn't realize this until after it had happened, even maybe a day later, that the position in which I put myself really became ground zero. It was the flashpoint.
I met with Captain Jefferson for the, I believe this is the 4th time now. And I told him real bluntly that the riots have started. I truly believe that this is the beginning of the riots, and that the intersection at Florence and Normandy, we had lost both north and south, east or west, that we did not presently have enough people deployed to safely accomplish taking that intersection back in any way, shape, or form.
It is just about 6 o'clock. Tom Bradley and Darrell Gates have yet to talk. Indeed, the police chief is getting ready to leave his headquarters at Parker Center to attend a political fundraiser.